Welcome to Valor Latino. I am your host this week, Victor Huyke. Perfecto Rivera is on assignment in Florida, and Sylvia Velez Ortiz is on assignment here in Milwaukee. So with us today, we have Chris Kimball, who has done an amazing job with study on crime. But the thing is, Chris has been doing this for a good while, and he has a website. I'll let him talk about that because I'm terrible with website addresses. I can't even keep my own, let alone somebody else's. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is that we got a chance here to talk for a few minutes, and it was just interesting to see a lot of the data that he's come up with. Now, Chris has been a guest here before, and this time around he brought his charming wife, and Mary, who is looking dynamite. And today we're here with Chris. Chris, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's been about 4 months since I've been here, and I thought maybe I'd just kind of talk about the new things that have happened. I'll start by saying that we're basically an educational website. We're called Stop Crime USA. This is actually a new name for us. We're migrating away from the name Stop Crime TOSA that I've used for a long time, but now we're also using the new name Stop Crime USA, and both names will take you to the website today. So as I said, we're basically an educational website primarily, and we've been doing this for quite a long time. I was on the show with Perfecto about 4 months ago, and some of the new things that have happened since then is that we were at the Turning Point Convention. That's the Charlie Kirk group, and I was able to get on a couple of national podcasts there. Then at the start of the year, I wrote a new article, and that was published at perhaps the top conservative policy website that's called American Thinker. And it's an interesting article, I think, because the title is Broken Windows Will Not Stop the Crime Wave. And I believe I document stuff that's never been documented before, which is that the whole thing about how Rudy Giuliani and broken windows theory turned crime around in the United States. Well, it didn't really happen that way at all. This is actually just kind of a lazy, unfortunate conservative myth, because the real story is that Rudy Giuliani was writing a wave of 3 different truth in sentencing laws, and 49 states also passed their own truth in sentencing laws. So anyway, that got published. And then a really big for us is that we've been advertising for 2 years through the National Fraternal Order of Police, and that means that they sign off on us, the president and the secretary. They know that everything we do is footnoted, hyperlinked, and that this is FBI uniform crime stats that are being used. And so we've done 2 big campaigns, and we asked them if we could be education vendors at their next convention, which is, it's a ways off, it's biannual, but they gave us approval. So we took that approval and sent it to the CPAC, that's the Conservative Political Action Committee, or is that what it's called? Yes. The big CPAC, National Conservative Convention that many of you probably heard about. We took 5 people down to the CPAC convention about a month ago and exhibited for 4 days there and talked to quite a variety of people around the country. And I would say that the thing I heard the most was people were very impressed with the data, and they had never seen anything like it. So those are some of the big things that have happened. And also we've gotten approval to be education vendors at 2 more upcoming conventions that are coming along. And I also gave a speech to a group of about 50 about a week ago. So a lot of new stuff.
No, that's amazing. And I took the time last night to look at some of the graphs that you had on your page, and I was quite impressed. That it's just a lot of the information. I was kind of disappointed with Milwaukee, but also at the same time, I can see that. I know that that's been the big shout out right now that Milwaukee's crime has dropped, but I don't really see that in your graphs.
Oh, well, yeah, it hasn't. And I'm going to talk about Tony Evers' new commutation board.
Please
and you
do.
can see right here on the graph, this is where Tony Evers came in. We're looking at the graph right now. And Tony Evers has presided over the highest homicide rates ever. I don't think he's ever talked about homicides in Milwaukee that I know of, and he certainly didn't do anything good for the city at all because in his tenure, crime shot up. The homicide rate actually shot up over 25 for the first time ever under his tenure. And last year,
which you should note that it is higher than during the crack epidemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's even higher than during the crack epidemic. And last year there was 141 homicides, and this year we're ahead of last year's pace. Milwaukee's homicide rate last year was 40% higher than Chicago's. And you might be surprised to hear that because of the many times Chicago is mentioned, but that's simply because their city is much larger. At Milwaukee's rates, there might be, if Milwaukee was the same size, 700 or even maybe some years over 1,000 homicides by comparison. So Milwaukee's far worse in homicides, and it hasn't gotten any better. And this has been during Tony Evers' tenure. We also looked at the chart, and something that's interesting about the chart, and Victor was appreciating my hard work into doing what one statistic is. I have homicides for Wisconsin without Milwaukee. And basically for 65, 70 years, there really, relatively speaking, has never been any kind of a homicide problem in the entire state of Wisconsin outside of the city of Milwaukee. It's never been, I think, over 3. It hovers around 2.5 or 3. These other numbers we're talking about, 20, 25, 30, and the peak at 38. In other words, the homicide rate in Milwaukee is probably 12 times higher than the rest of the state.
And that's the thing, too, is that I see that you also broke it down nationwide, and it still seems like we're even higher than the nation's average.
Oh, well, yeah, like 8 times higher or something like that. I guess the homicide rate in the United States right now is about 6, and in Milwaukee last year it was 25. So what is that? That's 5 times higher, 4 times higher. So it's pretty terrible. And of course, it's mostly in the blue cities where you have that. But anyway, one of the things that we focused on was we looked at the truth and sentencing revolution the revolving door revolution insanity that started in the 1960s and 70s, and how high the crime went up. And Victor was just amazed not only at the property crime, but I pointed out to him how I had to squeeze it down to even get it to fit on the graph. And you could just see that the crime is just skyrocketing. And from 1960 to 1980, and most people don't know this, and I'm talking criminal justice professionals, the reason why the crime went up is simply there was this insane ideology in the country that we wouldn't lock people up, that an enlightened society doesn't actually do that. And you can actually see it in the data that as the crime is going up, the incarceration rates are actually being cut down. They're going down. And effectively, with the increase in the crime and the cutting of the incarceration rate, overall, effectively, the incarceration rate was cut 80%. And by that time, the country was just on fire. And it took decades to squeeze it back out. So I wanted to talk about that in context with what Tony Evers just did. So he not only is presided over record homicides, but I wanted to kind of put what he's done in perspective. He's used his veto power more than any governor in Wisconsin history, including when he scratched out letters to mandate property tax increases for the next 400 years. He used his veto power in support of using puberty blockers, hormones, and gender surgical procedures on minors. Evers also declared that COVID was an emergency. He locked us all down. He closed the businesses and the schools. He invited radicals to invade Wisconsin during a summer of riots, and he made a really inflammatory statement about the police and about a specific issue where the police officer was later not charged at all because it was a justifiable actions on his part. And this is all, I'm bringing this up because Evers just did something that is really astonishing. It hasn't gotten a lot of press so far, but 3 weeks ago he just gutted truth in sentencing in Wisconsin. And he's long stated that he wants to put half the incarcerated criminals in the streets back on back onto the streets. So what he did was he created this commutation board, and this is basically a secret tribunal. The public and the media will not be allowed, and these people, along with Tony Evers, will now decide whether criminals should get out of jail. So basically what he's done is end the truth in sentencing, or maybe not end it, but do an end run around it. And what this means for us in Wisconsin is he's basically taken us back to the bad old days of the sentences don't actually mean what they supposedly mean. Life in prison doesn't mean life in prison, and long sentences don't mean long sentences anymore.
Well, that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out of this, because it seems like the language written up on this is very loose. I mean, 5 years without an incident. I mean, if you're in prison, you can go 5 years without an incident real easily, you know. And
you would think.
Yeah, you know. And then the thing is, too, is that, you know, they said, well, people that have been involved in sexual crimes don't qualify for this. But here's the thing that gets to me. And actually, I talked to Jessica McBride at length at this because she brought up a valid point. We were talking about the Anderson case related to this, because she says that Anderson could qualify for this. And if you don't remember, a lot of Anderson was the young man who took out that young lady and went and took her to dinner, et cetera, and then ended up killing her, cutting her up into different parts and laying her body all out throughout the city. But one of the things that she says that he would qualify for this. And I was like, that seems kind of a stretch, you know. And she says, well, here in nature is that what he did, he goes through the 5 years. He'll be, you know, he's already been incarcerated for 2 years. So that means in 3 years he can get out. And I was like, well, that's still a little strong. And I said, well, wasn't his crime sexual in nature? And she says, yes, but he was never charged with a sexual crime. So that just even more makes it a wider door open for him, you know? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I have really concerns about that. I understand the concept is that the prisons are getting overcrowded and the state budget is a problem, and he's trying to relieve some of the prison, but I mean... Well,
let me say that I don't think the state prisons are being overcrowded, because overall, nationally, the incarceration numbers have gone down about 20%. So, you know, we're not being squeezed by more people going to jail at this present time at all.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the thing is that I think, too, is that they're trying to find measures to try to get people back into society. And I get it, you know. I mean, I think people deserve a second break, but, you know, in cases where it's been a third, fourth, fifth break, you know, when do we say, okay, guy, you're obviously not getting this, you know? And I think that's the thing, too, is that the rate of recidivism is really the problem, you know?
Well, things got so bad in the 1980s that actually for every 100 crimes, not even one person on average was going to jail, believe it or not. So, and if someone went to jail, that was only on average for 2 years. But generally, when I say someone went to jail, typically these people would go through the criminal justice system and get probation, and it would be, after 4 or 5 swings through the court, that they would finally go into be sent to prison, and they would only spend a short amount of time there. So the criminal justice system was just completely shattered. I'd like to explain something that might surprise a lot of people. People think that truth in sentencing means tougher sentencing, and that's actually not what it means. What it really means is it's the end of fake criminal justice. Probably the thing that infuriated people the most, which happened all the time, was that even if the courts and the judge did their job, and many of them weren't, but even if they did it, it was very common. In fact, it was like every day that, just for example, maybe someone would get 20 years in prison and they'd actually be out in a year and a half. So the sentencing didn't mean anything at all. The judges would often give impressive, strong sentencing messages, you might call it, but in reality, it wasn't that at all. So this is it was simply a fake criminal justice system, really, for many years. And so, unfortunately, I think Evers just brought that back, the sham back, that long sentences mean, we're going to protect the public. No, Tony Evers has set himself up as the final arbiter now to decide these things.
No, and that's the thing is that concerns me, especially to the fact of a board that, that can make a decision without any public influence or anybody saying,
they're totally
what happened to the victim's right,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. It's like you're looking at the victims, and at least in the current system, you can go before the board, the judge, or whatever, and say, "Hey, look, my family's still upset about this. We feel that this person still has an animosity towards us, et cetera." With this, that part is totally gone, and I think that's part of the problem is that it just keeps creating, which is one of the things I'm looking at that you cover is the whole revolving door system, and and that's part of the problem. It's like, we've seen a lot of, like our previous DA, John Chisholm. He was one that was notorious for the revolving door.
He dropped something like 60% of the misdemeanors and or 65% of the misdemeanors and 60% of the felony charges that were brought to him. He just dismissed those. And then he actually came to Wauwatosa one day, and he told the Common Council that they had a triage crisis. And then he bragged about how lax he was about the juvenile prison in Lincoln, I think it was. So I mean, that just does, incarceration doesn't work or something like that in his universe. But
right,
he's in. He didn't do us any favors. Actually, his election is, I noted on the homicide graph because it was a bullet point worth noting. He didn't accomplish anything as a DA as far as reducing crime.
No, and that's the sad part because, that's, to me, that's, next to the police officer, he's part of the front lines, and for him to just reject a lot of this stuff was, just more hurtful than helpful, And, hopefully the new DA, he's not new, but, hopefully he'll start picking up some of those cases that need to be picked up. But, we won't talk about him because obviously he had no problems prosecuting Sylvia Ortiz on this silly thing, but that's politics.
We have that. Well, as someone who's studied crime for a long time, I can just guarantee you that what Evers doing is guaranteeing higher crime.
Right.
And it's very sad because, I try to work for making things better by bringing the objective data, and I know he's completely wrong about his theories, or maybe we don't understand what his real background motivation is. But There's a lot of revolutionary insanity in this country. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know already.
Oh, ain't that the truth? Well, that's the thing. I said, I just look at this and I'm really fascinated. Where do you get a lot of your information from?
Well, I get a lot of my information by the fact that my lovely wife, Mary, gives me a lot of support, and she's right in there with me doing a lot of stuff. Well, actually, the reason I started doing this is just because no one else does it. And I had things swirling in my head, and I ended up writing a really long footnoted history. And one day, Wisconsin Interest called me up. Today they're called Badger Institute. And they said, we've been publishing for over 20 years. We've never published an unsolicited article. However, this is excellent. They published it. They paid me for it. And then 16 years later, I basically updated the article. The new article was published by MacIver Institute. And I've kind of thrown myself into it since then. So, and then about 3 years ago, I realized that, it's so hard to get people's attention. I started doing graphs. And at this point, altogether on the website, there's about 24 graphs. And some of them come from something called the Reynolds Report. This was, and again, nobody I've ever talked to has ever heard of it before. But this was a think tank, and they took every category of crime and they grafted it against incarceration. And when the incarceration got sabotaged, the crime went skyrocketing. And as soon as things got a little tough on the criminals, the crime immediately started going back down again. So the Reynolds Report was actually knocked off the internet for many years. I'm not sure whether it was nefarious reasons or not, but I decided to put that on my website. So with their 8 graphs and my 16 graphs, there's altogether about 24 easy-to-understand graphs at the website, backed up by national published articles like the new one that I just mentioned about broken windows.
No, and that's the thing is actually I was started to read that one, and I said, oh, yeah, I definitely need to finish reading that article. And that's what I like about it. The concept is that former police chief Arthur Jones, he really believed in the broken windows theory, and he tried to push it like crazy, but I don't know. I didn't see any results.
It's just too simplistic. Sebastian Gorka just recently said, well, Rudy showed us the way. You got to enforce the little things. And, it's simplistic. Bob Donovan ran on broken windows, too. And I told him, look, Bob, you have no chance of succeeding because the Common Council and the DA and the governor are all opposed to you. As I said, the secret for Rudy Giuliani was he was on the front of a wave. The year after he became, first off, crime was going down 2 or 3 years before he became the mayor. And then the year after he was elected, I just showed it to you in the chart, that the federal truth in sentencing law was passed, and also New York State passed a truth in sentencing law, and then 3 years later, New York State passed another truth in sentencing law. So he's literally riding a wave of 3 different truth in sentencing laws, and crime is falling all across the country. And conservatives went around and said, "Oh, look at the way crime's falling in L.A." Somehow Rudy Giuliani had something to do with that. No, that doesn't make any sense, does it really? No, it was because finally we had hundreds of new laws, and that's the other thing that I document in the article, that there was at least 7 categories of law that all had to be rewritten. And it's interesting, why did these laws that used to work in the 1950s, why aren't they working in the 1980s and 90s? And that's because there's so many people in government today that are dedicated to undercutting the criminal justice system and finding all the loopholes that they literally had to write new laws. I heard a DA complain or observe that the statutes today are very long. They used to be short. Well, that's because all the loopholes had to be plugged.
Right.
And that's why you had to rewrite all these laws. And the thing is that right about here, Victor, and I'm kind of pointing at a chart now. Crime is falling like crazy, and this is when I wrote my first big article. And you might ask me, well, why did I write an article at a time when crime's falling all across the United States? And I basically tried to tell the Republicans, okay, that's great what you're doing, but you're not winning ideologically. You don't seem to want to hold the lunatics who caused all this crime. You don't want to hold their feet to the fire, and you're not winning ideologically. You're not defending your history. So we were talking about this right here, about how the Democrats set the country on fire. The term revolving door crime wave used to be like an everyday expression, like talking about the weather.
Right.
The criminals were back on the streets before the police could fill out the paperwork. And not only do the Democrats write history today, where they pretend the 1960s and 70s don't even exist, but the other people who don't talk about it is the conservatives. They're completely lazy about remembering any kind of history.
Right.
And you can prove this because you can do a web optimization, and you can see that how many people are looking for revolving door crime, and you'll find out that nobody is looking for that on internet searches, but millions of people are looking for end mass incarceration, the fiction that we have mass incarceration when in fact what we really have is mass crime, and finally a reaction to it to start bringing some sanity back to the criminal justice system.
Well, that was that was one thing that I found interesting in the graphs that you had, was that during the period of when truth in sentencing was first starting out, that we were also going through a great recession. And what I found interesting was that during that time, crime went down, and something that you pointed out was saying that a lot of this was young men who come from families that are single mother. And to me, that pretty much showed that even with a single mom, which obviously that's always been a thing throughout history, that these young men still did not commit crimes, did not do anything. And which I found interesting because during a recession, crime goes up. And in this case, you were showing that crime had gone down.
Yeah, I showed you a graph that said for 100 years, crime didn't follow hard times, bad economies, or high unemployment, not one time in 100 years.
Yeah, and
so
that kind of shoots
really
that
about
argument out.
Economic hardship? Not really.
Right, and that, you have, what's the old saying, the proof is in the pudding, and you got the pudding right there, that it showed that, so it has to be behavior. And now the question is, where's this behavior? Obviously, it's not in the home because the parents don't have it. It's somewhere that they're picking up, whether it's school, the streets, friends, social gatherings, social media,
Well, I'll tell you why I did the graph is because two people, one of them was Bob Donovan, was going on and on about it. And I said, of course, to me, it's really tragic, the breakup of the family. I said, but, say it one time. There's unfortunately we have all these out of wedlock births. But I said, Bob, just say it once and then move on because there's nothing you can do about it. And the mistake would be to keep throwing the young people to the streets, to the drugs, to the gangs. You got to do the right thing. And then I did the graph, and I was surprised myself. I thought, what's this going to show? And it only showed a negative correlation. So the data just says that you certainly can't build your criminal justice ideas on bad information. The information says you need to do the right thing. Prioritize protecting the public, giving us justice, and crime will go down. I don't really talk about crime in any kind of a utopian way. We have a lot of crime in the United States, but we have actually for 60 years we've had massive crime, and I would say half of it is political. It's just bad policy decisions. So I'm not saying that if people took this to heart that you'd be living in some kind of utopia, but you'd have tens of millions of people's lives not being shattered. Do you know how many homicides we've had in the last 65 years since the Democrats took over? Over 1 million, plus even more opioid deaths. And that adds up to more deaths than all U.S. wars combined.
Good heavens.
And those deaths don't even represent 1% of the reported crime in the United States either. So millions and millions of people's, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people's lives have been shattered by idiotic policy.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. All the stuff you have here, we can go on all day. I can imagine doing a show just specifically on this because you've collected a lot of information, a lot of data. But unfortunately, our time has run out. But, I mean, I think this is great. This is a great opportunity that if you want to fight crime, you have to study it, and you've done an amazing job of it. You've broken it down to a science, and it's freaking beautiful. For anyone who wants to get a hold of you and wants to look at your information, you want to share that, please?
StopCrimeUSA or .com. Yes. Thank you for chiming in, Mary.